Chapter 21 Ravenclaw's Flying Lesson. You are listening at Mtlnovel Aud. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw students walked to the lawn where flying lessons were held. Standing here, you can see Hagrid's hut and the Forbidden Forest in the distance. Sometimes you can hear strange sounds coming from there was a sound over there, unlike Gryffindor, who loves adventure, and Slytherin, who likes to stir up trouble. Ravenclaw knows how to protect himself wisely, and usually only explores within the rules. Hufflepuff students are all well-behaved, and more they will not actively violate the rules. Most students in these two colleges will not take a step into the Forbidden Forest until they graduate from 7th grade. About 20 broomsticks were neatly arranged on the ground, and Mrs. Hooch was already waiting there in advance. She stared at the students with alert and scrutinizing eyes like a hawk, and said sharply, "I guess you have heard about yesterday's accident. Fortunately, Mr. Longbottom of Gryffindor only broke his wrist, but if you are reckless it won't be surprising if someone breaks his neck." The little eagle and the little badger nodded in agreement. "Okay. Now everyone stands next to a broomstick." Under the watchful eye of Mrs. Hooch, everyone moved quickly without fighting or grabbing. It's just that the school's broomsticks are old, and each one is very worn. The branches are spread out in a disorderly manner, and the oak handles are uneven. Sweeping the floor is uncomfortable, but they're going to sit on this thing and fly. Wade suddenly felt that flying on a broomstick might not be friendly to the tailbone. He heard Michael mutter under his breath, "Meteor, the cheapest broom." Wade took a look and saw that Michael's broom was a little more worn out than his. "It looked like it was made of weeds," Mrs. Hooch said loudly. "Stretch out your right hand, put your hand on the broom handle, and say, 'Get up. Get up.'" The students shouted together. Wade's broom rolled on the ground twice before jumping into his hand. He reached out and held it, feeling that he didn't need to use much force because the broom would float in the air on its own. He turned to look at the others. Some people succeeded immediately, and some people, like Michael, the broom bounced on the ground like a dehydrated fish, and it took a long time to reach his hand. After all the students held the broom, Mrs. Hooch taught everyone how to ride the broom so as not to fall off, and severely corrected some students' wrong sitting postures. Vader originally thought this would be simple, because he remembered that in the movies, Harry Potter always just jumped on his broom and flew away. But after actually riding it, I realized that this kind of thing is not that simple. After all, a broom handle is just a thin stick, and balancing on it requires some skill. Fortunately, the pressure on some fragile bones was not as great as expected, and there was some kind of spell cast on the broom that made riding on it feel like sitting on a chair. Not too comfortable, but not that uncomfortable either. Until everyone's sitting position satisfied Mrs. Hooch, she allowed the students to proceed to the next step, flying. "As soon as I blow the whistle, you guys will kick hard to the ground." Mrs. Hooch said, "Hold on to your brooms, but don't lift them too high, unless you want to fly into the clouds. Lift up a little, and slowly rise a few steps. Feet high, then slowly slides forward, then slowly returns to the ground." Mrs. Hooch said slowly 3 times in a row, and then said, "Pay attention to my whistle, 3, 2, 1. When the whistle sounded, the students immediately appeared in different layers. Some flew too high, some plunged to the ground, and 2 students failed to maintain their balance and rolled off their brooms with a grunt. Mrs. Hooch frowned and waved her wand in time. Finally, no one was hurt. Suddenly, another scream was heard. A girl from Ravenclaw House rushed towards the broom shed on a broomstick. "There are many obstacles." Mrs. Hooch shouted. The girl stayed in the air for a moment, and then although she still hit the wall, the force had slowed down, but her broom was knocked apart. Mrs. Hooch did not scold her, but used the flying curse to summon another old broom and asked the girl to continue practicing. Vader rode his broom and hovered at a higher place, and then tried to increase his speed little by little. There are only 5 or 6 students like him who can gradually control their own brooms, and most of them are ordered by Mrs. Hooch not to fly higher than the height of the broom shed. Even so, accidents continued. For example, 2 students' broomsticks were crooked, and then collided in the air uncontrollably. For example, there was a Hufflepuff boy who flew very well at low altitude, but as soon as he raised his broom to a height of less than 5 meters, he blinked. Quan fell off his broom, the poor student was afraid of heights. The first flying lesson can be said to be chaos. Mrs. Hui was putting out fires in all directions like an octopus, waving her wand with a swishing sound, constantly rescuing students from various crises that might break their necks. She herself was hit by a reckless student, which made Mrs. Hooch look livid with anger and deducted a full 5 points from Hufflepuff. Wade finally understood why Mrs. Hui always had a bad look on her face and looked very angry. Any experienced driver who is teaching a novice driver to drive and sees that the novice driver keeps making some low-level and stupid mistakes will probably be like Mrs. Hui. Finally, the flying lessons were over, and the students went to the school infirmary in droves to see Madame Pomfrey for treatment of various scrapes, sprains, and falls. Wade and Michael were intact, and they returned to the auditorium for dinner together. Vade, Hermione, who was eating, saw them and immediately waved to say hello. Wade saw that she was sitting alone at one end of the long table, so he simply walked over and sat at the Gryffindor table. Hermione glanced at them and asked, "Did the flying class go well?" "Too tired," Michael said tiredly. He felt that he needed to replenish a lot of energy. After taking 2 pieces of bread with butter, he put a roasted chicken leg on the plate. Wade first poured a glass of juice and drank it all, and then said, "Everyone is flying for the first time, very unskilled. More than half of the people were slightly injured, and some people fainted." Hermione nodded. "I have to say, I'm not surprised at all. Flying in the air without any protection, it's natural to get injured." That she obviously didn't like riding a broom or Quidditch at all. This is a skill that requires diligent training to master. A good Quidditch player can fly more flexibly than a bird. After a flying class, Michael finally regained his energy. But Wade remembered that he had been hovering in the air during class. If he flew a little higher, the broom, or Michael on the broom, would start to tremble. He was a typical novice who loved to play, but Michael convinced him with just one sentence. "Think about it, Wade," Michael said in a bewitching tone. "We can fly directly to the dormitory on a broom, and we don't have to climb the stairs anymore. I saw the students on the Quidditch team do this." Chapter 22 Umbrella House and SSC. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That day, until he went back to the dormitory to sleep, Wade's mind was full of flying brooms. At night, he dreamed that he was flying on a broom, as free as a bird. He flew over Hogwarts Castle, over the stadium, over the Forbidden Forest and the Black Lake. That he circled on the grass and passed through the corridor of the castle. Everyone looked up at him in surprise. Michael was hanging on the stairs half dead, his eyes were dull with exhaustion. But Wade was far away from those damn stairs. He drew a graceful arc in the air, and finally passed through the window lightly and landed directly on his bed. After waking up, Wade still had the wonderful feeling of flying freely in his mind. He looked at the ceiling with a sense of loss and couldn't fall asleep for a long time, but first-year freshmen are not allowed to bring brooms to school, and a Nimbus 2000 costs at least 1,000 gold galleons. Gray's father Ferdinand opened a toy factory, and the products can be sold to the United States, so their family is relatively wealthy among ordinary people. Wade also has a lot of pocket money, which allows him to buy all kinds of snacks at will. But anyway, asking parents for 1,000 galleons to buy something like a toy is something that Wade couldn't do. It would be nice if he could achieve financial freedom by himself. Wade couldn't help thinking, if he was in the Muggle world, he could quickly accumulate wealth with his understanding of the future. But as a student in a boarding school, how can he make money? Wade couldn't help but imagine. Saturday was a day off, and when Wade arrived at the practice room in the morning, he found Hermione was already there. Among the few people, Hermione spent the longest time in the practice room. Wade sometimes read in the common room or dormitory of Ravenclaw because he didn't want to go downstairs, but Hermione spent almost all her free time in the practice room. Wade was sure that the girl didn't have any friends in Gryffindor College except for Neville, and the girls in the same dormitory didn't seem to have a good relationship with her. The girls always acted together, went to the classroom together, ate together, and went to the toilet together, but Hermione was always alone. However, Wade did not persuade her to get along well with her classmates. Emotional intelligence is something that is innate, and Wade himself is not the type who is good at dancing with long sleeves, and he does not like to compromise himself to please others. but today, the girl was not studying, but ping-pong nailing something on the wall. What is this? Wade leaned over to take a look. The rectangular wooden board was decorated with simple patterns and a line of cursive characters on it. Umbrella Room? Wade's expression was a little strange. He thought of Umbrella Corporation, a company that made biochemical viruses and destroyed the world. Yes. Hermione nailed the last nail and said, "There are many practice rooms, but this is the only one that belongs to us. I think it should have a special name. In this way, when others hear us say Umbrella Room, they don't know where it is." Okay. Wade didn't care much about such trivial matters. He took a book from the shelf and sat down to start writing homework for yesterday's herbology class. Today's practice room, or umbrella room, has changed a lot compared to the original. Each of them occupied a space against the wall, with bookshelves placed against the wall, and arranged the table around it according to their own preferences. Hermione's shelf was full of books, many of which were borrowed from the library and had not been returned. She also had a thick stack of brand new parchment, 2 bottles of ink and 7 or 8 quills. These things of hers were consumed very quickly. Since parchment was more expensive, Hermione usually took notes in notebooks bought from Muggle stores. The Granger family was not short of money, but the girl's character was somewhat thrifty and would not spend money on unnecessary things. In addition to textbooks, Wade's shelf also had all the notes he had sorted out so far. Michael and others often borrowed them. According to them, with Wade's notes, even if they didn't attend class, they could pass the final exam. In addition, there were many props for transformation, such as buttons, matches, chess pieces and other commonly used things. After the flying class, a miniature model of a flying broom was quietly added to his desk. Michael's place was much more fancy. He put all kinds of messy things such as perfume, mirrors, gift boxes, chocolates, etc. on the wall. There was a poster of a Quidditch star on the wall. On the table was a model of a dragon, cookies that were not finished yesterday, and badges collected from somewhere. Michael proved with his own actions that not every Ravenclaw loves learning. Theo from Hufflepuff is very much loved by Professor Sprout, and he is also very good at herbology. There are 2 rows of fist-sized small flower pots on his shelf, which are all plants cultivated by Theo himself, including common white moss, mint, marjoram, yarrow, etc. There is also a pot of Meeboo on the table. This plant looks like a diseased internal organ, covered with boils, and will spray sticky and smelly liquid to attack others. In order to avoid accidental injuries, Theo put a hemispherical glass cover on it. Neville likes Theo's arrangement very much. He also wants to get a similar one, but because of the limited pocket money, he currently only has 3 or 4 pitiful flower pots. He also prepared some fertilizer, and everyone was asked to put it in the corner of the umbrella house so as not to affect breathing. Ryan is also good at herbology, but his favorite is astronomy, so there is a set of planetary models on his desk, and the large and small planets will slowly rotate around the sun in the middle. In addition, Ryan also collected various quills and inks of different colors, neatly placed on the bookshelf. Several other people came to the umbrella house one after another. They noticed the new name of the practice room and praised it. Michael also clapped his hands on the table and praised Hermione for her cleverness and surprise. Although she knew that this guy was just habitually praising women, Hermione's cheeks were still slightly red with joy. Theo put down his schoolbag and said, "If you ask me, not only should the practice room have a new name, we should also have a name to show that we are a whole." Yes. Ryan nodded. "If you always think that I am a Hufflepuff, he is a Ravenclaw, and you are a Gryffindor, there will always be a gap. We should be a collective that transcends the differences between colleges." Suddenly it feels formal. Michael said excitedly, "Then what should we call it?" Wade? He looked at his friend. Wade was suddenly called out, and was stunned. After-school tutoring interest group? You'd better not give any suggestions." Michael turned his head expressionlessly. "Hermione?" Hermione was suddenly a little nervous for some reason. "Magic Lovers Club." Michael sighed. "Hermione, what's the difference between this and Wade's after-school tutoring interest group?" "What about Neville?" Neville stammered. I can't think of anything for the time being. Theo said, how about the Sunflower Club? Sunflowers symbolize hope, sunshine, loyalty, determination and growth, isn't it very suitable? Michael began to struggle. Indeed it is very suitable in all senses, but it feels a bit ordinary for some reason. If he were to name it himself, he couldn't say anything better. Lien. Michael looked at the last person, and decided that if he didn't have a good idea, he would call it the Sunflower Club. Ryan fiddled with the planetary model on his desk, thought for a while and said, how about Starry Sky Chaser? SSC for short. Michael clapped his hands and praised loudly, cool. Chapter 23 Jokes and Secrets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With an official name, this group that had just happened to get together suddenly became official. Everyone discussed some details together, for example, adding other members must obtain everyone's consent, cannot destroy other people's things, SSC members should protect each other when facing professors or other students, etc. Wade originally felt that this was somewhat of a game, a group of just a few people, who would gather or break up if they didn't, what rules and regulations should be set. But everyone else participated very seriously, which gave Wade some strange feelings. It was as if he had really joined some mysterious organization. Root was used as an antitoxic drug in ancient Greece. It was discovered in the 16th century AD. So far, people have found that its medicinal value has the following types: the extract of stems and leaves can expel toxins, pollen sprayed on basilisks. The poisonous gas produced has a defensive effect, rue can be widely planted, and the cultivation method is, you need to pay attention when cultivating. Wade placed the last letter on the parchment and finished yesterday's homework for herbal medicine class. As for the homework for other subjects, he had completed it as early as the day he finished class. Vader checked the grammar again, waited for the ink to dry, and rolled up the parchment. Vade, are you done with your homework? Hermione came over and asked. Right. I have something to tell you. Hermione whispered. The two of them moved to the other side of the classroom, and Wade waved his magic wand. Close your ears and listen. So no matter how loud they speak, it is just a subtle buzzing in other people's ears. Vader looked at Hermione's worried expression and asked, what happened? That's right, the afternoon before yesterday, that guy Malfoy asked Harry to duel at midnight in the trophy room. As soon as I heard that, I knew that guy had no good intentions, because he didn't have the courage at all. Hermione said angrily, but Lee and Ron didn't listen to my advice at all, just for the sake of Boy's face, they were so selfish. They didn't even think about how many points they would lose if they were caught. Hermione took a few deep breaths and suppressed her anger before continuing, of course, that's not the point, because we were lucky enough not to be caught, even though it was just a little bit. You. Wade caught the key word. Yes. When I was trying to stop them from doing something stupid, I was accidentally locked out of the lounge door and had to act with the two of them. Hermione frowned and said in disgust, it turned out that Malfoy did not go to the prize. In the showroom, he also revealed the news to Filch, that despicable guy. Then when we escaped, we broke into a locked room. Hermione suddenly lowered her voice and asked, Vade, do you remember what Professor Dumbledore said when school first started? Vader thought for a moment. Dumbledore's speech was not much in content. Of course, what impressed him most was idiot. Cry. Residue. Wretched. Oh, it's not this. Hermione rolled her eyes and reminded, it's anyone who doesn't want to suffer an accident and die a painful death. Don't go to the corridor on the 4th floor. Wade remembered, you guys went to the 4th floor. What did you see? Yes. We accidentally ran to the 4th floor, and then we saw Hermione swallowed, with some lingering fear on her face, a 3-headed dog as tall as a house. How did you survive? Vader was speechless. He couldn't remember such details for a long time, and he didn't expect Hermione and the others to start experiencing such an adventure so early. He said, I remember seeing this kind of monster in a book. Although today's three-headed dog is not the legendary hell dog, its teeth can easily crush a skull, and there are corrosive poisons on its teeth. The wound will be difficult to heal after being bitten by that guy. It might not have reacted at first, but then it roared and pounced on us, and we were almost eaten by it. Hermione clenched her fists, her body trembling slightly. The school actually put such a dangerous monster in the castle, it's unbelievable. Even if you want to use it to guard something, what if another reckless student breaks in? Doesn't the school care about the safety of ordinary students at all? Vader made a joke, maybe the magic school has something like a death indicator. It doesn't matter how many students die every year, it just serves as a wake-up call for others. Let them know not to take the professor's words inappropriately. One thing. There is such a thing. Hermione scratched her face in horror and said incoherently, but I didn't see it at all in Hogwarts, a school history. Yes, this kind of thing, of course it won't be in the book, it's terrible. How could the Ministry of Magic allow it? Vader didn't expect that she didn't doubt his words at all, and he quickly raised his hands to apologize. I'm sorry. Hermione, I was just talking nonsense. Don't take it seriously. Hermione looked at him blankly, tears even forming in her brown eyes. Now Vader really felt a little guilty in his heart. He said sincerely again, sorry, I just saw that you seemed to be scared, so I made a joke. But it seems to have turned into a hell joke. I am an idiot. Don't be angry. Hermione kept a straight face and said nothing, and was so angry that she ignored Wade for a long time. It wasn't until the practice was over and everyone else had left, that Vader stopped Hermione and apologized repeatedly, finally letting the girl let go. Hermione lowered her head and said dully, actually, I know, everyone doesn't like me, but I treat you as a friend, so don't tease me like others. Vader was so soft-hearted that he felt so guilty that he would slap himself even if he thought about it in the middle of the night, because he knew that Hermione was not having a good time in Gryffindor during this period, so he appeared sensitive and vulnerable. He raised his 2 fingers and said seriously like an oath, I'm sorry, I promise there will never be a next time. Hermione looked into his eyes for a long time before whispering, a joke must make both parties happy before it is considered a joke. I remember. Vader felt ashamed. He actually wanted a real 11-year-old girl to tell him such a simple truth. Could it be that after reviving his life, he really regarded himself as a heartless little boy? Looking at the vortex above his head, Hermione smiled slightly. Okay, I'm not angry anymore. The girl coughed dryly, speaking of the three-headed dog, actually, I want to discuss with you whether I should go find Professor McGonagall. You want to talk to Professor McGonagall about the safety of three-headed dogs? Vader understood what she meant immediately. Yes. Hermione scratched her already messy hair in annoyance and said, although they have locked that room, it can be opened with an unlocking spell. If any curious students run in, alas, I would like to suggest to Professor McGonagall that the room should be hidden with powerful magic, but that would reveal that we have violated the school ban. Why don't you think about it from another angle, Hermione? Wade thought for a moment and said, maybe the door was so crudely sealed just to allow someone to open it. Chapter 24 Purchasing on Behalf of Others. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hermione's eyes slowly widened, and she obviously understood something. She trembled and said, so, that's it. That's right. Wade said, it's Harry Potter. Death Index. Hermione shouted at the same time. The two looked at each other. Harry Potter? Hermione said in surprise. It's a joke. Wade said helplessly. The two looked at each other again. Hermione frowned. Hermione gradually understood. No wonder. She whispered, Percy, Gryffindor's prefect, a fifth-year Weasley, said that in the past, Professor Dumbledore would explain the reason for any place where students were not allowed to go. But this time, he just said that students were not allowed to enter the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor, but he didn't say why. If it was clearly stated that there was a three-headed dog hidden there, even the Weasley twins would not run to seek death, let alone Potter, who is only in the 1st year. Wade was not surprised. The vague warning is to attract the curious Gryffindor, Dumbledore probably left some test there. He remembered that Harry Potter played a real-life game in the first year. He and his friends each solved a level with their own wisdom and ability. In the end, Harry used the magic of love to kill the bottom boss Voldemort. The 7 Harry Potter books are thicker and darker than the previous ones, but the first one is still full of childishness. Even the conspiracy and trick seem innocent and cute. Voldemort came to Harry Potter to gain experience. How could he do that? Hermione's fear immediately turned into anger. Someone might die. Does it matter? Or does he not care about Harry Potter's life at all? Then did you rush in unexpectedly and get hurt by the 3-headed dog? Wade asked back. That's not the case. But that's because it started, Hermione suddenly realized, and felt like she had seen the truth through the fog. I guess, just a guess, maybe Dumbledore put some restrictions on the 3-headed dog, so that it would not really attack the students who accidentally broke in, but just scare them. But if you want to do something further, the 3-headed dog will not sit idly by. Wade said cautiously. I saw it standing on a trap door. Hermione said, it must be guarding something. If the facts are as we guessed, Wade finally said, Harry Potter will definitely know what it is guarding. The progress of things seemed to be slowed down, perhaps because Hermione was angry with Harry and Ron and didn't pay much attention to them, so she didn't get any further news, but Wade didn't care much about these things. He knew that everything was under Dumbledore's watch and there was nothing to worry about. Compared with Harry Potter's adventure, Wade was more concerned about the progress of spells. In the latest practice, he accidentally discovered that it was not only when he was guiding others that he could see the arc of guiding the correct method of casting spells. When he looked in the mirror, he could also see his own guiding line, which made his spell practice much faster. So Wade took some time to practice potions. There were always a lot of ordinary materials on the shelf behind the potions classroom, free for students to practice, but because of Professor Snape, most students were unwilling to step into the underground classroom except for class. Even Slytherin students. Wade practiced potions in his spare time, and Snape turned a blind eye and occasionally pointed out his mistakes in a sarcastic tone. Overall, as long as you are not a glass heart, you can still learn a lot from him. At this time, Wade was glad that he was a Ravenclaw. If he was a Gryffindor lion, he might have been kicked out by Snape on the first day he stepped into the potion class privately. One afternoon, Wade successfully boiled a pot of wound cleaning agent, which was evaluated by Professor Snape as barely usable, and asked him to send it to Madame Pomfrey in the infirmary. The Quidditch game was about to start, and the infirmary would become busy at this time. When Wade returned to the Umbrella House from the school infirmary, he found that everyone was very excited. Everyone gathered around Theo, and even Hermione put down her book and said in a calculation, I want 3 feet of thick parchment and 5 bottles of ink. I heard that there is a kind of shorthand quill pen that is very useful. If there is one, I also want to buy 2. Theo wrote it down quickly, and Michael next to him shouted, oh, please, Hermione. I know you love to study, but life would be so boring if there was only study. You should buy yourself something that can bring fun. Honeydukes candies are super good. I recommend blowing super bubble gum. It can fill the whole room with blue bellflower-colored bubbles, which is almost the favorite of girls. Fizzy Bee candy is also a hot-selling product, and there is also butterbeer from the 3 Broomsticks bar. Almost no one can resist drinking a cup. Hermione hesitated for a long time and said, then bring me another galleon of candy. No cockroach piles or weird things like that. Although it is not convenient for her to bring the candy back to the dormitory, this will definitely be questioned by other girls, and maybe even say some sour gossip, but she can put the candy in the Umbrella House and share it with her SSC partners. What are you talking about? Wade walked over and asked curiously. You are finally here, Vader. We have all been waiting for you. Neville said happily, this week is the first Hogsmeade weekend. Students in 3rd grade and above can go to Hogsmeade Village. I know. Wade said, but what does this have to do with us first-year students? Of course Vader had heard of Hogsmeade. It was the only village in the UK with only wizards and no muggles. It was said to be very unique and interesting, and it was right next to Hogwarts and could be walked there. However, Hogwarts stipulates that only third-year students and above can go there on specific Saturdays, and they must have a signed permission from their guardian. Therefore, Vader and the others will not be able to go to Hogsmeade for at least 2 years. It didn't matter originally, Michael said excitedly, but Theo said, a third-year Hufflepuff student said that he could help the younger students buy some things they wanted, and also made a list of the product list of Germode Village. Theo and Ryan said they can help us add the things we want. Wade took the product and looked at it while curiously asking, who is so kind? He doesn't mind the trouble, or is he doing it to make a profit? Ryan shook his head and said, no, Cedric is not helping to make money. Wade was startled. What did you say his name was? Cedric. Ryan said, Cedric Diggory, the #1 student in the 3rd year. There are almost no Hufflepuff students who don't like him. Chapter 25 Bibi Many-Flavored Beans. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wade didn't ask any more questions. He looked down at the product list first. As a small village, Hogsmeade cannot be compared with the commercial center of the British wizarding world like Diagon Alley, and the number of shops is not too many. But although the Sparrow is small, it has all the essentials. You can find almost all types of shops, such as clothing stores, quill shops, magic equipment shops, post offices, bars, tea houses, etc. Of course, the most popular among students is the candy store. There is a long list of various candies on the product list, which is the sum of all other categories combined. Wade looked at the things that others wanted to buy and couldn't help but ask, can he get so many things? In the Hufflepuff lounge, Cedric specifically said, Theo smiled, he said, don't worry about whether my arms can lift it, there is a levitation spell. The rest of the 3rd grade the students said they could help too and would not leave Cedric alone. Michael lay on the table and lamented feebly, oh, why don't we Ravenclaws have such enthusiastic seniors? They will only look at you sideways and say something, don't worry, you will also be there in 2 years. I can go. And for your safety, no one offered to bring us a handful of sweets. Oh, it's another day to go to Hufflepuff. Theo and Ryan looked at each other and smiled proudly, and Hermione and Neville invariably thought of Gryffindor's prefect Percy Weasley, I am a prefect, you must listen to me. Do you want to cause deductions for the house? Junior students, don't try to get away with it, Filch will check them one by one and won't let anyone who shouldn't go slip out. Of course, I will also help keep an eye on you troublemakers. Or the 2 Weasleys in 3rd year, of course no problem, dung bombs or burping powder. What an idea. You'll give Filch a surprise. Psyche 15 silver sickle. I swear, only 5 nuts more expensive than Hogsmeade. However, before they got the money, Percy discovered their purchasing behavior. The most important thing was that most of the purchases made by the twins were prank products that would make Filch scream, so the 2 brothers were chased by their older brother. Running around in the lounge, although Hermione and Neville are very different in academic performance, they are both marginal people in Gryffindor to some extent. They swallowed their complaints against the Weasleys, but in their hearts they envied the atmosphere of Hufflepuff. But he heard Vader smile and say, Michael, let's not say that we envy Hufflepuff for having a senior who is willing to take care of the younger students. When we reach the 3rd grade, you are willing to help the little wizards of Ravenclaw with shopping. Various candies. Are you kidding me? Michael said without thinking, this is so troublesome. I don't want to spend my last weekend just completing the to-do list. So, we are our own Ravenclaws. Vader said in a calm voice, choosing some products that others had not chosen so much that they could exchange them with each other after buying them. I just don't know if Cedric will be shocked by Theo's long list. Actually, I think, Vader, you are the same person as Cedric. After the day's study was over, Theo stayed specifically and said this to Wade. Huh. Vader was still immersed in a petrification spell at this time and completely forgot what everyone had said before. Theo looked into his eyes and said seriously, although I have never said it before, the reason why our SSC group came together is entirely because of you, Vader. You always selflessly guide us to practice spells. And you are also willing to share with us the notes you have compiled with great difficulty. I have never seen another Ravenclaw do this. Wade was a little surprised. He looked at Theo and didn't know what to say. Michael and Hermione are so smart, they play with us all because of you, me, Ryan, and Neville. The three of us originally didn't have outstanding grades, and we were even at the bottom in some subjects, but because of your help, we have recently begun to earn some points for the college. Professor Flitwick praised us several times. In the last herbal medicine class, Neville dared to raise his hand and speak, and Professor Sprout even gave him a bonus. 1 point. Theo finally concluded, Vade, you are Ravenclaw, but you are by no means egotistical or indifferent. You have given us a lot of help, that's what I want to tell you. For a long time after Theo left, Wade felt that his heart was filled with an inexplicable emotion. He packed up his things, walked out of the umbrella house, and saw Claudia in the portrait walking in the grass. There was a trace of sadness between the girl's brows, and her expression was very much like the Sister Lynn in his impression. Watching the door of the umbrella house close, Wade said to himself, how could it be possible that they all gathered because of me? That guy Theo, could he have forgotten that this classroom is still his? I applied with Professor Sprout. Miss Claudia remained silent as ever. She never talked to the students, nor did she occasionally go out to visit like other portraits. She always stayed on this empty lawn. If she hadn't walked around occasionally, it would have been no different from a Muggle portrait. As expected, Cedric kept his word. He helped buy everything Vader and the others wrote on the list, and he didn't charge an extra canute. Oh my God, I'm flying! Hermione exclaimed. The brown-haired girl just drank a glass of drink and slowly floated up from the ground. Wade hurriedly reached out to hold her, so that she wouldn't fly too high and fall down and get hurt. After a long time, the magic of the drink disappeared, and Hermione slowly fell to the ground. She said a little angrily, they should write the precautions for consumption on the packaging. How interesting, Hermione. Michael said. Hermione blushed and glared at him, but I'm wearing a skirt. Michael was speechless and bowed his head and said, I'm sorry, you're right. Watch it. Theo shouted, I'm going to eat this black pepper urchin. Everyone looked at him expectantly. Theo threw the candy into his mouth, chewed it a few times, and his expression suddenly changed. The next second, he was spewing fire from his nose. Everyone laughed. Michael grabbed a handful of Bibi's multi-flavored beans and distributed them to everyone, saying excitedly, come, try this multi-flavored bean. Let's bet on who is the most unlucky. He was the first to throw one into his mouth. It's okay, it tastes like carrots. Ryan ate one and said with a bitter face, unlucky, earwax tastes. Wade was curious, how do you know what earwax tastes like? Ryan was stunned, looking up and down, then turned to Theo as if nothing had happened. Hurry up, it's your turn. Theo ate it with a smile. Honeydew melon taste. So lucky. Hermione also ate one. Beef taste, not bad. Neville looked at the yellow multi-flavored beans in his hand with fear, muttering, isn't it always me who is unlucky? He closed his eyes and swallowed it, then stuck out his tongue and shouted incoherently, water, water, water. Did you taste the taste of sand? Michael handed him the water and asked curiously. Neville drank a large glass of water and said tearfully, it tastes like a super hot chili. Everyone looked at Wade. Wade looked at the multi-flavor beans with disdain. He had never eaten this specialty of the wizarding world, because he heard that the Bibi multi-flavor beans even tasted like vomit. What kind of mischievous thinking was the manufacturer? But everyone was waiting for him. After a while of mental preparation, Wade finally threw the beans into his mouth. What does it taste like? His companions asked curiously. Wade breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, it tastes like snow. Chapter 26 Floating Spell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. No matter what the reason is, the increase in time spent together will cause subtle changes in people's relationships. Some will become closer and closer, such as Vader and his SSC companions. Some will become more and more hostile, for example, Potter and Malfoy. Their new pecking each other has become a scene in Hogwarts. In the evening, Wade and Michael returned to the Ravenclaw lounge once again stuck at the curfew time. As soon as they entered, Michael was called away by two girls. Tomorrow is Halloween, the students are very excited, and there is something going on in the lounge. A small party is held, and Michael is one of the few first-year students invited. The upperclassmen bought a lot of butterbeer, rum and whiskey during the weekend at Hogsmeade, and there was a heady smell filling the common room. Michael wanted to drag Wade over, but he waved his hand and refused. Wade had always been indifferent to such gatherings. Last time, he saw two people he didn't know well kissing passionately on the sofa after drinking too much. A bunch of people around were applauding and cheering, drinking beer and spilling it, giving off an atmosphere of drunkenness and indulgence. Although Wade has lived in the West for 11 years, his thoughts are still reserved. He is much more cautious about feelings and physical contact than his classmates. Walking back to the dormitory along the spiral staircase, the dormitory is as clean and tidy as ever. The clothes I changed out yesterday have been washed, ironed, and neatly stacked in the closet. There is also a pot of boiled water on the desk, which is steaming. Wade poured himself a glass. The temperature in his mouth was just right. The long table at Hogwarts usually only has various fruit juices, vegetable juices, or hot chocolate, and students usually drink raw water directly. Wade was not used to this. Some time ago, he tentatively left a note on his dirty clothes, saying that he hoped to drink hot water when he returned to the dormitory. The next morning, when he got up, he found a steaming pot of black tea on his desk. The house elves probably didn't quite understand what hot water was, and maybe no one had ever made such a request to them, so Wade added another sentence, "Thank you for the black tea. But what I want is hot water obtained by boiling water directly without adding tea leaves." From that day on, no matter when he returned to the dormitory, there was always a pot of hot water waiting for him, and it was the same when he got up in the morning. It has to be said that at least half of the comfort of life in Hogwarts is brought by house elves. Before going to bed, Wade placed 3 mini pumpkin carriages on the table, which he made using the transformation technique. There was also a small lantern the size of a bean hanging in front of the carriage, emitting a bright green light. To Zoe, Phil, Happy, thank you for your dedicated service. This is a Halloween gift for you. Wish you, Happy Halloween. When I woke up early in the morning, it was already Halloween, and the whole castle was filled with the smell of roasted pumpkins. The pumpkin carriage on the desk has disappeared, replaced by a new pot of hot water, a plate of pumpkin cookies, a handful of flowers and a pile of beautiful pebbles. The heart-shaped biscuits are fragrant, the flowers are still covered with dewdrops, and the thumb-sized pebbles look like gems. These are all carefully prepared return gifts by the house elves. Vader couldn't help but laugh. He didn't mind that the elves' gifts were too cheap. The house elves all belonged to Hogwarts, and they owned nothing except the tea towels they wore, and even the tea towels actually belonged to Hogwarts. Halloween was not a holiday. There was a charms class early in the morning. Professor Flitwick divided the students into pairs to practice the levitation spell. Vader and Anthony Goldstein were divided into a group. "Don't forget that subtle wrist movement we have been training," Professor Flitwick said sharply. "One wave and one flick. Remember, the wrist must be waved and flicked. It is also very important to recite the spell accurately. Don't forget about Wizard Baruffio, who said the F instead of an S and found himself lying on the floor with a bison standing on his chest. The students all started chanting, Yingadam Leviosa. The feathers in front of Vader immediately fluttered up. He had already used this spell many times in the Umbrella House, mainly to move tables and chairs. Hermione and Michael also succeeded one after another, and Professor Flitwick was happy. He clapped his hands and said, "Well done, I'll give you 2 points, everyone." Then a scene that surprised everyone even more appeared. The feathers in front of Neville fluttered tremblingly, floating 2 feet above him like a turbulent boat in the waves. The Gryffindors' eyes almost popped out of their heads in surprise, because Neville had always been clumsy no matter what class he was in, and no one except Professor Sprout would praise him. Moreover, the floating spell is very difficult for young wizards, and the feathers in front of most of them remain motionless. So seeing Neville use the levitation charm, albeit less successfully, was almost as shocking as seeing a troll do ballet. "Great! Great, Mr. Longbottom!" Professor Flitwick screamed and jumped in surprise. 5 points for Gryffindor. "Isn't it right? That Longbottom succeeded?" Wade heard Anthony beside him say in surprise, and then he cast the spell over and over again, but the feather still didn't move. Anthony was a tall, strong boy, and he had no problem reciting the incantation, but the detailed and subtle movements of waving and shaking were too difficult for him. He practiced over and over again, and his movements became more and more deformed. Wait! Seeing that he was about to poke the wand into the back of the head of the student in the front row, Wade grabbed his wrist and said, "Try this." He drew a steep curve like a sine wave on the paper, and marked the direction with an arrow, marking where it should be faster next to it. After zooming in, it floated in front of him, and said to Anthony, "Wave the wand according to this line, and don't go beyond the range." Anthony didn't question it. As both Ravenclaws, they all knew that Vader's spell skills were the best in his grade. The blond boy first made silent gestures to himself, then waved his wand. Yingadam Leviosa, the feathers immediately floated up, flying higher and higher under Anthony's command, even touching the chandelier overhead. Anthony looked on with surprise, almost reluctant to put down his wand. Terry Butt and Lavender Brown, who were sitting on the left and right of them, looked at each other and stretched out their hands almost at the same time. Finally, Lavender used her superior agility to grab the parchment and pull it in front of her group. Yingadam Leviosa, on the right side of the classroom, more and more feathers were floating, which naturally attracted the attention of Professor Flitwick. As soon as Lisa Dupin grabbed the parchment, she saw a small palm pulling the parchment away from below. Professor Flitwick took a look and said with a smile, "Oh, a very clever way of guidance." Chapter 27 Alchemy and Weasley. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Professor Flitwick took a look and said, "Oh, a very clever way of guiding. Although it is a shortcut, it can really help you master this spell faster. Wade, this must be your idea." Wade bent his eyes and showed a bright smile. Professor Flitwick, who was originally serious, also smiled. He waved his wand and copied the parchment 10 times, so that each group could have one, and warned, "This is a reference, but you must really master it. I will take back the parchment in 10 minutes. I hope that you will have mastered the levitation spell by then. Students who can make the feather float, why don't you try to make it turn in the air?" The students in the classroom started practicing again, and Professor Flitwick walked around to guide. Wade directed his feather to draw a circle in the air for a while, and then drew a square, and then began to recite the poem. Anthony looked at it with envy, but he didn't aim too high, but continued to practice the levitation spell over and over again. After class, the Gryffindors rushed to their History of Magic class. The Ravenclaws had no other classes in the morning, and Wade went to the library as usual. Michael was going to go with him, but he was stopped before he got up. "Hi, Michael." His roommate Terry put his arm around his neck and asked, "You haven't been seen every time after class recently. You went to study with Wade, right? I heard that Granger and Longbottom from Gryffindor went with you." A circle of little eagles looked at him with bright eyes. Michael raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "That's right, I didn't hide it from you. Why is there such a scene?" "So Longbottom can master the levitation spell, which is the result of your self-study?" Lisa asked hurriedly. "I thought you were just doing homework together." "Michael, can you spare some time to teach me too?" Padma asked. "I'm not very proficient in the fire spell." Padma is a very beautiful Indian girl, and Michael has always been fascinated by her, but when it comes to learning spells, Michael will not steal the credit of others. "Although I am happy to teach you the spells I have mastered, Padma, it is Vader who is good at teaching, not me. We are all learning from Vader," Michael said honestly. "Vade." Everyone was silent for a moment. In their eyes, Vader Grey was particularly cold, handsome but serious, talented but isolated from the crowd. Obviously, he was the same age, but he didn't like to joke, play games, attend parties, or even talk about Quidditch. He always disappeared after class and didn't return to the tower until curfew. Usually, other students were used to chatting and doing homework in the lounge, but Vader rarely appeared in the common room. The little eagles felt that they were all unilaterally isolated by Vader. In short, he was a very distant person. This is also the reason why few people usually talk to Vader. The little wizards are a little afraid of him. The library was deserted, and Madame Pants didn't stare at the students, but took a book and slowly opened it. Seeing Wade coming in, she just glanced at him and lowered her head to read again. 2 months after the start of school, Madame Pants has become familiar with all the first-year students who often come to the library. She knows very well which students can be allowed to stay in the library without worry and which students need to be watched all the time, otherwise they will make noise, destroy books, or even fight. Wade is the kind of student that she can be completely assured of. Wade came to the area of alchemy books with familiarity. He recently began to take time out to study alchemy. Alchemy studies the composition, structure, and magical properties of the 4 basic elements, as well as material changes. It is closely related to potions, spells, ancient magic runes and defense against the dark arts. At Hogwarts, only those who have achieved good or above grades in these subjects in the ordinary wizard level examination can choose to practice alchemy. It is a very difficult subject. If low-grade students do not have the corresponding knowledge reserves, it is difficult to master this subject through self-study. In fact, their lives are full of the shadow of alchemy, the candles in the hall that never go out, the 142 moving stairs in the castle, the portraits on the walls that seem to be alive, the door knockers that ask different questions, as well as the flying broom, the golden snitch, the sorting hat, the wizard chess, the memory ball, etc. Basic alchemy is not that difficult to get started, but alchemists always like to use all kinds of uncommon words, obscure expressions, and exaggerated words mixed with fantasy, which invisibly raises the difficulty of learning. Wade's reading comprehension ability has been cultivated and trained for more than 20 years in his previous life, and he has enough knowledge reserves and vocabulary. Therefore, although it is difficult, he still reads the books on alchemy one by one. Some time ago, he read the books published by Mtlnovel many years ago, Alchemy Begins and Analysis of Alchemy. Recently, Wade started reading the Book of Nature's Mysteries, The Fifth Element. This is written by the 12th century alchemist Mtlnovel Aud. The so-called fifth element is the Philosopher's Stone. This book is actually a bit outdated, because Mtlnovel Aud made the Philosopher's Stone, and he proved that many theories in this book are inconsistent with the facts. A voice came from the side suddenly, and Wade looked up in surprise, and saw the Weasley twins standing next to him, and the one who spoke was George Weasley. "Are you a freshman?" Fred simply pulled up his chair and sat across from him, saying, "It's too early to learn this now. But I have to say, you are very discerning. Alchemy is the most fascinating subject in magic. Close your ears and listen," George said, waving his wand to prevent Mrs. Pants from rushing over. "But Hogwarts isn't available until 6th year. It's a really stupid decision. Why can't we offer alchemy courses in 1st grade? Then most students don't dare to go home during the summer vacation," Fred said, pretending to be serious, "because they are destined to get a T, extremely poor, in their final exams. Except us. We're naturally good at this. So I started studying by myself a year ago." George said, "As a senior, I give you a suggestion, little Ravenclaw, you should start with alchemy preliminaries. Mtlnovel Aud is still alive now, the greatest alchemist. His books are worth studying." Wade spread his hands, "But I've already finished reading that book." "Wow." Fred raised his eyebrows. "What about analytical alchemy?" "Seen it already." "What about, On the Diversity of Species?" George asked. "The works of Thomas Aquinas in the 12th century?" Wade hesitated and said, "I have seen it, but I have not read it carefully, because his book does not seem to involve the application of magic." George said, "Actually, it was because of the constraints of the environment at the time that he had to entrust the books to muggles for publication. The content related to magic was very obscure. Of course, we recommend the 18th century book by Esnia Vargas. In the revised version, he added more than 200 magical creatures and thousands of magical materials, making it more comprehensive and accurate. The Weasleys have read at least 20 or 30 books on alchemy, and have studied them in depth, and they can talk about them all like they are familiar with them." Vader felt like he had found a treasure, so he simply took out the parchment and wrote it down. If he didn't have classes to attend in the afternoon, he wouldn't even want to let them go. The few people were chatting so happily that they didn't even notice when they parted. They didn't ask each other's names. Chapter 28 Halloween Dinner. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Today we are going to learn simple biological deformation, which is more difficult than ordinary object deformation. I need you to pay special attention. Professor McGonagall was lecturing in front, and the chalk automatically wrote the key points on the blackboard. Okay, does anyone know the dangers of biological transformation? The classroom was quiet, and there was no hand raised impatiently like usual. After a while, someone raised his hand hesitantly. Miss Mandy Block. Professor McGonagall looked at her encouragingly and said, Ravenclaw's Mandy Brogue stood up. There are 4 points in total. First, incomplete transformation will cause great irritation to creatures and then attack wizards. Second, Wade raised his head and looked around the classroom. He didn't see the brown-haired figure, but the other Gryffindor students were there. He asked Michael next to him, have you seen Hermione? Michael also raised his head and looked around, guessing, are you feeling unwell and resting in the dormitory? Professor McGonagall didn't say anything. This made sense, but Vader felt uneasy for no reason. At this time, Professor McGonagall glanced sternly at this side, and the two of them immediately shut their mouths, not daring to speak any more. When get out of class was over, the students swarmed out. Vader walked through the crowded corridors and found Harry and Ron. Excuse me, Potter, Weasley. Looking at Vader walking straight towards the two of them, Ron took a step back inexplicably. What's the matter, Gray? Have you seen Hermione? Wade asked, why didn't she come to Transfiguration class? Harry subconsciously looked at Ron, who had a trace of uneasiness on his face and said guiltily, how do I know? We are not familiar with Granger. Wade narrowed his eyes slightly and looked directly into Ron's eyes. Ron lowered his eyes to avoid his gaze, grabbed Harry next to him, and said in a bluffing tone, if you have nothing else to do, we are going to have a rest. He pulled Harry away, but suddenly a voice came from behind him. Harry Potter. Harry looked back and saw Vader staring at him seriously. Do you really not know what happened? Against his gaze, Harry felt as if he had been dragged out into the sun, and his mouth felt dry. He wanted to defend his friend, but he couldn't lie. Hermione, Hermione, she cried, after Charms class. Harry finally whispered, we didn't see her again after that, I'm sorry. He was finally dragged away by Ron. Wade stood there, motionless, frowning and thinking. However, time has put a lock on his memory. He tried hard to recall, but he couldn't remember anything. Did they have a quarrel? Michael said clearly, Hermione's character is a bit too serious, so it's not surprising that she would quarrel with those Gryffindors. Let's go, she won't miss the Halloween dinner together. We'll ask what's going on later. Vader nodded. Not far behind the two of them, Padma tapped her fingers thoughtfully, then quickly caught up with her twin sister, talking to her in a low voice. In the evening, the auditorium hall has been decorated, with a huge jack-o'-lantern suspended below the ceiling and colorful skulls decorating the walls. Countless bats circled and danced in the auditorium, sometimes gathering together and whizzing past like dark clouds, and the flames in the jack-o'-lanterns also flickered. The dinner has not yet started, but students from the 4 colleges have almost filled all the seats, and professors are also arriving one after another. Dumbledore also deliberately changed into a Halloween-themed costume. He wore a pumpkin-colored robe with a small bat pattern on his hat, and talked to Professor McGonagall next to him with a smile. Vader glanced at the long Gryffindor table, but the lions were too noisy. The Weasley twins were running around with several boys, and there were exclamations and laughter from time to time. Wade stared for a long time, but couldn't find where Hermione was. At this time, someone suddenly tapped his shoulder. Before Wade could turn his head, he smelled a faint aroma. Padma pushed Anthony aside, who was sitting next to him, leaned closer and said, I know where Granger is. Wade asked, she didn't attend the dinner? No. Padma brushed the hair on her temples and whispered. Parvati said, oh, you should know, Parvati is my sister, she is in Gryffindor house. She said after Charms, that Weasley guy said something bad about Granger, said she was a nightmare and all that. Ron Weasley. Michael stretched his head over and asked in surprise, he is so talented. I mean, didn't Hermione give him a curse immediately? She cried. She cried in the toilet for a long time. Padma emphasized, she was very sad and refused to let others comfort her. Parvati asked for leave for her in the afternoon transfiguration class. I just went to the toilet. After turning around, Granger is still inside. I'll go take a look. Wade stood up immediately. Padma said enthusiastically, I'll take you there. But the dinner is about to start. I didn't eat much at lunch just for this meal. Michael muttered. Seeing Wade striding quickly out of the auditorium, he finally stood up with a sigh and trotted to follow. Go up. As students arrived at the hall one after another, a few people who went against the flow stood out. At the Gryffindor table, Harry accidentally saw Wade walking out of the hall. He was originally immersed in the joyful atmosphere of Halloween and had completely forgotten what happened before, but at this moment, it was as if a basin of cold water was poured over his head, and his memory was instantly revived. Ron! He grabbed his friend's arm and asked, Is Hermione not back yet? Ron, who was looking forward to a feast, didn't care much. It seems so. What's wrong? I just saw Gray and the others go out. Are they going to find Hermione? Harry said. Maybe. Granger has a good relationship with them. Well, they're going to find them anyway, so don't worry. Ron said indifferently. He was really fed up with Hermione's preaching, although he felt a little guilty when he saw the girls' tears. After so long, that guilt had long disappeared, and instead, the disgust brought by Hermione's condescending instructions was even deeper. But Harry hesitated. They are all Ravenclaws, but Hermione is Gryffindor like us. A bat controlled by Fred's wand landed on Ron's head, and there was a burst of laughter around. Ron was busy driving the bat away and didn't pay attention to what Harry said. Harry hesitated for a moment, and finally left his seat before the dinner started and ran out of the hall. Dumbledore and Snape turned their eyes almost at the same time and watched him leave. Chapter 29 Giant Monster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the girls' bathroom, Hermione was immersed in sadness when she heard two gentle knocks on the stall door. Hermione, is that you? Who are you? Hermione choked, Are you here to laugh at me too? I'm Padma Patil. Padma said softly, The Halloween dinner should have started, Hermione. Vader and Michael are waiting outside, they are worried about you. You go to the dinner party, don't worry about me. Let me stay by myself for a while. Hermione said stubbornly, wiping away more and more tears. Originally, she had been crying for so long and her tears had long since been shed. She was still hiding here just because she felt sad and didn't want to go out and face other people's eyes. But when I heard my friend's concern and was comforted by someone's gentle words, tears welled up again. Padma put her hand on the door panel of the cubicle and said softly, Hermione, I know what bastard things Weasley said. But I don't understand why you should be sad because of the unfair evaluation of a stupid boy, but ignore it. A friend who really cares about you. Everyone says you are the smartest witch in the whole grade. Can't you tell what is really important? Hermione's sobs stopped and she didn't speak for a long time. Tell me a secret. People who slander you behind your back are often motivated by low self-esteem and jealousy. If you are smarter than others, better than others, and better than others in every aspect, they will want to hurt you by saying bad things. If you are heartbroken over this and push all your friends away, then the bad guy will succeed. Padma said, the best way is to ignore those who slander you, shine your light, and don't focus on the corners. If you don't feel happy enough, punch him in front of him. After all, you are the Lion of Gryffindor, right? Squeak. After a while, the compartment door was pushed open. Hermione walked out with red eyes and a cry in her voice. I am not the smartest witch, Padma, you are really smart. Padma smiled and gave her a hug. Wade and Michael had been waiting in the corridor for a long time and finally saw two girls coming out of the bathroom. In fact, they also heard Padma's advice to Hermione, but no one mentioned it. Michael opened his arms and joked with a smile, Would you like me to give you a warm hug, Hermione? The brown-haired girl wiped her eyes, hugged Michael with a force that would break his ribs, let go when he was dazed, turned around and hugged Wade hard again. Thank you, sorry," Hermione whispered. Wade rubbed her head without saying anything. "No need to apologize, but I can't wait to go enjoy the Halloween dinner now. I hope they haven't finished the dessert yet," Michael said, rubbing his belly, "otherwise we will have to go to the kitchen to steal some food." Padma asked curiously, "Where is the kitchen in Hogwarts? Why have I never seen it before?" Michael suddenly became energetic. "The kitchen is very hidden. If it weren't for Theo and the others." Vader paused, stretched out his hand to block the others, and quickly drew out his wand with his other hand. "What's wrong?" Michael paused and asked in a low voice. Wade asked, "Didn't you hear the sound?" Michael didn't answer, because all of them had already seen it. A huge, gray-green hand grabbed the wall around the corner, and a whirring sound came from an invisible place. Everyone's faces instantly turned pale, and Padma groaned, "Merlin, what a monster." A huge creature came out from around the corner. It was 12 feet tall, its head almost touched the ceiling, it looked like it weighed at least 2 tons, and its skin was as disgusting as a toad. A huge body, a fat belly, and a short neck with a bald head with few hairs. The guy still exuded a disgusting stench, his long arms almost dropped to his knees, and he was holding a tree trunk-like stick in his hand. "Impossible, in the castle, how can there be a troll in the castle?" Padma's face turned pale, her legs were weak, and it was Hermione who supported her body. The giant monster lowered its head and saw a few people. There was cruel excitement in its small eyes. It raised its heavy legs and strode toward the people while raising the wooden stick in its hand. With trembling hands, Hermione pointed her wand at the troll, but she didn't know what spell to use. Michael fired spells repeatedly. "Petrify them all. Petrify them all." He has not mastered this spell yet, and the spell falling on the giant monster is like a rhinoceros hide being hit by raindrops, with no effect. Vader raised his wand, all the spells he had mastered flashing through his mind. He has many spells at his disposal, but the troll's magic resistance is so high and its body is so strong that even the spells of an adult wizard can hardly work on it. This is a kind of monster that has no brains and no magic power, and the danger level is still as high as XXXX level. Creatures are on the same level as thunderbirds and sphinxes, although when Vader watched monsters and where to find them for the first time, he felt that there was definitely something wrong with this classification. But at this moment, facing this kind of monster that is taller than a house, I still feel a suffocating feeling of oppression. Boom! A bucket suddenly hit the giant monster's head. Harry emerged from nowhere and shouted at them, "What are you doing standing still? Run!" Michael woke up from his dream, turned around, grabbed the 2 girls and ran away. Wade took a step forward and pointed his wand. Flocks of birds, a swarm of chirping birds flew out from the tip of the wand and flew into the troll's face. The simple-minded troll was immediately attracted to his attention. He purred from his throat and clumsily drove away the birds with his palms as big as palms. Seeing that it was useful, Michael and others also shouted, "Flocks of birds," but their spells had no effect, and the tip of the wand just fired a spark, briefly attracting the troll's attention. A dozen birds released by Wade surrounded the giant monster. The behemoth roared and made a terrifying roar. It smashed the surrounding decorations to pieces with wooden sticks, but there was nothing the flexible birds could do. But as time goes on, the number of birds is declining rapidly. Michael shouted, "This spell will hold him back for 10 seconds at most." Vader waved his wand vigorously. The chute is flat. The floor under the troll's feet suddenly became very slippery. It fell unexpectedly, and its huge body hit the ground heavily. The entire floor seemed to shake, and the wooden stick in its hand flew out. Hermione, who looked like she might faint at any moment, mustered up her courage, stretched out her wand and shouted, "Wingardium Leviosa." The wooden stick flew up high and fell again, hitting the giant monster on the head with a clang. The giant monster shook its head, struggled and roared to get up. Hermione gritted her teeth and manipulated the wooden stick to hit her a second time, a third time, and a fourth time. The troll finally passed out happily. Hermione stopped breathlessly and turned around to see several people looking at her in shock and awe. "What's wrong?" The girl's face turned slightly red. She pretended to be nonchalant, looked at Padma and said, "Well, you're right, giving it a punch is really satisfying." Padma was stunned and speechless. This, is this what I taught you? She was a little afraid to look into Wade and Michael's eyes. Harry, troll. A troll has gotten into the castle, go back to the dormitory. Giant. Ron rushed over yelling, and then his voice suddenly stopped. He took a breath when looking at the scene in front of him, and asked blankly, what happened? Chapter 30 Professors. You are listening at Mtlnovel Audio. Ron held his face and screamed, you killed a troll. Harry looked at everyone and saw that no one seemed to care about Ron, so he said, no, Hermione knocked the troll unconscious. After a pause, he unconsciously added, used the levitation charm. The reason for the conflict between the two in the charms classroom before was that Hermione tried to teach Ron how to use the levitation charm correctly, but because of the instruction in her attitude, Ron became more dissatisfied. Hermione. Ron was really surprised and muttered, how is this possible? That's a troll. Hermione snorted hard, holding her wand. She was excited and terrified, staring at the motionless guy on the ground, as if something in her blood had awakened. Padma poked her head out from behind Wade and whispered, is the troll dead? No. Wade looked at the troll's slightly heaving chest and said, it was just knocked unconscious. Oh, that's good. Padma patted her chest. Suddenly there was a flurry of footsteps. Professor McGonagall rushed over first, her face pale, followed closely by Professor Snape, his black robes floating behind him, then Professor Flitwick, his small stature running fast, but still unable to catch up with the two in front, finally Professor Quirrell, who saw the troll's calloused feet head-on, and immediately clutched his chest and sobbed. As if he was about to faint, Snape quickly glanced at Harry, who was standing blankly by the side, and bent down to check on the troll. Professor Flitwick said sharply in his unique, thin voice, oh, Merlin. Children, are you all right? We are fine. Professor. Michael said excitedly, except that we were almost vomited by the stench of the troll. Professor Flitwick patted his arm happily and praised loudly, good job. First grade, defeated a troll. I dare say not many people can do this. How did you defeat this big guy? Ha ha ha, this is everyone's credit. Michael tried to retract his grinning mouth and said as modestly and seriously as possible, Potter rushed out to attract its attention. Professor Snape immediately glared at Harry with a threatening look. Harry quickly lowered his head, wishing that Michael had never mentioned him, but Ron next to him looked at him enviously. We all used the flock of birds to interfere with it, and then Wade used a spell. Michael forgot what it was and turned to look at Wade. The slide is flat. Wade said. Yes, the slide was flat, so the troll fell down. Michael continued, finally, Hermione knocked it out with a levitation spell. Professor Flitwick applauded and praised, excellent cooperation. It's amazing. A simple spell has achieved remarkable results. I want to give each of you 5 points. Phileas, Professor McGonagall shouted loudly. The unprecedented stern tone made Professor Flitwick, who was originally dancing with joy, shrink a little, shut his mouth silently, and stand aside. The green-robed witch swept everyone with cold eyes, and every student who looked at her lowered his head involuntarily, including Wade. Trolls are very dangerous creatures. There are countless adult wizards killed by trolls. You should run away immediately when you encounter it and find the professor to deal with it. This time you are lucky that you were not killed by it. Miss Granger. Hermione shuddered. Professor McGonagall looked at the girl's brown head and asked, I remember you asked for leave this afternoon because you were not feeling well. Why are you here? Hermione probably never lied to the teacher. Being questioned in person, her mind was in a mess and she stammered, I read about trolls in books, I thought. Wade pressed the girl's shoulders and pushed her aside. This silly girl didn't want to say that she thought she could fight the troll, so she secretly ran to fight alone. This excuse was so stupid that even the troll would not believe it. It's okay if they don't believe it, but what if someone blames them for the troll breaking into the castle? Don't think this won't happen. Wade remembered that Harry was misunderstood by his classmates in the original book more than once or twice. She felt better in the evening and didn't want to miss the dinner, so we were originally going to the hall together. Wade said calmly, when we passed by here, Hermione and Padma went to the bathroom. Michael and I waited for a while, and when we left, we met the troll. We should have run away immediately, but it happened suddenly and everyone was scared and didn't react. Fortunately, Harry Potter diverted the attention of the troll and reminded us. Several professors looked at Harry again, and the boy's face flushed. He always felt that he didn't deserve such high praise. Michael looked at Wade thoughtfully, and understood something in his heart, and added, yes, he smashed a bucket on the troll's head and shouted for us to run fast. Really brave. Professor Snape, bucket. Harry stared at the ground, feeling that he was about to be tortured by Professor Snape's eyes. He now suspected that the two Ravenclaws were praising him so hard just to divert the professor's attention. What about you, Mr. Weasley? Professor McGonagall turned to Ron. Why didn't you go back to your dormitory? Ron was just thinking that he should have come with Harry, so that he could become a hero who saved everyone, and most importantly, let the arrogant Granger look at him in a new light. Suddenly, he was called by Professor McGonagall, and he was speechless and forgot what he should say. Professor McGonagall's eyes gradually became sharp. Harry could only stand up for his good brother and mustered up the courage to say, Ron is to remind us that there is a troll. Yes, we all heard it. Professor Snape suddenly sneered, and he said sarcastically, yelling in the corridor, as if he was afraid that the troll would not find him. I think it should be written in your books that the troll's hearing is more sensitive. Oh, I am afraid Mr. Weasley's textbook has never been opened. It's like our savior Mr. Harry Potter used a bucket to attract the troll's attention. Bucket? I really hope you haven't forgotten that you are still a wizard. The Gryffindor duo's ears turned red with shame and anger. Michael secretly gave Wade a thumbs up in his heart. If he hadn't promoted Harry Potter, they might have been the ones being ridiculed now. He didn't know that Snape's obsession with Harry was permanent and unswerving. Even if there were 1,000 people here, he could only see Harry Potter, but with Professor Snape speaking, Professor McGonagall's anger seemed to have eased. She pondered and said, since it is excusable, I will not deduct any extra points from you. I will inform Professor Dumbledore about this. You all should hurry back to the lounge. The students are enjoying the Halloween dinner in their own colleges. Everyone hurriedly left, and when they were out of the professor's sight, someone suddenly laughed, and several people laughed one after another.